For those that may not have seen this already, this is a really important development. And this was, of course, December 21st, so it's not exactly new information. But because people were so focused on the tax situation, they may not have noticed this, but this is pretty big stuff. The United States sanctions human rights abusers and corrupt actors across the globe. And this was an executive order that, as you can see, was implemented on the same day, I believe, as the tax, the tax, what do we call it? The new tax laws came into effect. So this is something that is a long time in coming. Although, I guess it was about February that there's some action that was taking place. Some of the actors were being rounded up in terms of the human trafficking that was going on in some of the cities across North America, but in particular the United States. And this is going to have huge implications, because for those that haven't been following, and I keep referring to George Webb, he's been talking about a lot of these issues and how they're all related. It's difficult to follow sometimes if you haven't been keeping track of what's going on, and it's hard to put everything together. And I think there's been a purposeful desire to keep things confusing, and that is kind of how the deep state works. But this is really, really important. Today, the United States is taking a strong stand against human rights abuse and corruption globally by shutting these bad actors out of the U.S. financial system. So basically what's happening, too, is that there's a clamping down on the assets of people who may or may not be involved in human trafficking. So while some of us have a problem with the government getting more and more involved with some of the issues around, surveillance and that sort of thing, this is very directed. This is some people that should have been put in jail a long time ago, and that have been protected in so many different ways. And I would say that this is going to reach definitely to the Clintons. Now let's just take a look at this. This is the actual order. So this is the executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. And so you can take a look at this if you like. It's at whitehouse.gov, and you can just take a look by the name of the executive order, blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. So this is just a really profound step forward in terms of clearing the swamp, draining the swamp, because what's going to happen is all the swamp creatures are going to be left. As the draining happens, we're going to be seeing all sorts of really horrible creatures and some of them that we had no idea were there and just lurking below the surface, and some that we knew were lurking below the surface and have not been able to be cited or apprehended up to now. So human rights abuse and corruption undermine the values that form an essential foundation of stable, secure, and functioning societies, have devastating impacts on individuals, weaken democratic institutions, degrade the rule of law, perpetuate violent conflicts, facilitate the activities of dangerous persons, and undermine economic markets. The United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuses or engage in corruption. So another thing that, I'm not sure if I've still got this open, but okay, yes, this is the tie to Uranium 1. So this is from Zero Hedge. This was published today. Some interesting stuff. So this has a tie-in with this order. As you can see at the top here, the Trump administration quietly issued an executive order last Thursday, which would have been the 21st, which allows for the freezing of U.S. housed assets belonging to foreign individuals or entities deemed serious human rights abusers. So that ties in with what I was just reading there, the executive order. And it was quite quiet. A lot of people were so focused on the tax-related issues that they didn't see this. But this is so incredibly important, and I just wanted to bring it to people's attention. Furthermore, anyone in the United States who aids or participates in said corruption or human rights abuses by foreign parties, okay, so that's anyone in the United States who aids, even if they are citizens of the United States, who aids in the abuses by foreign parties is subject to frozen assets, along with any U.S. corporation who employs foreigners deemed to have engaged in corruption on behalf of the company. So this has a lot of implications, because we can talk about the Awan brothers here. Those that have been following the George Webb investigation will know what I mean. And hopefully you've heard about the Awan brothers by now. You know about Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You know about Imran Awan. You know that he's up on some really specious charges and that don't even begin to touch on the kinds of things that he's been involved in. But it's not just him, it's the people who are enabling him. We're talking about Nancy Pelosi, we're talking about Debbie Wasserman Schultz, we're talking about Hillary Clinton, you know, all the different people who have been facilitating this. I'm sure Chuck Schumer's been involved, so many people that claim to be innocent, or I don't know what they've got on these guys, but they have clearly been part of this whole corruption, this spying in Congress. So this does have implications for that, but it also reaches out as far as Uranium One, because it discusses the idea of material. In fact, anyone in the world who has materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to foreigners targeted by the executive order is subject to frozen assets. This is a big deal, because what's the reason that people get involved in all of this chicanery, this lobbying, this pay for play, particularly the Clintons? Money. And so what happens when the money goes bye-bye, when it actually gets frozen? Well, I guess that is going to be the question, isn't it? So here we go down a little bit farther. We see that the EO executive order, based on the 2016 Global Human Rights Accountability Act, immediately added 13 foreign individuals to a list of, quote, specially designated nationals, SDN, maintained by the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, several of whom have ties to the Clintons, the Clinton Foundation, or Clinton Associates. Details below. Well, you can read this. It's on Zero Hedge, and it was published today, so it won't be hard to find at all. Moreover, the Treasury Department sanctioned an additional 39 people for a total of 52 under the new order, including the son of Russia's prosecutor general. It's amazing. This is huge. I mean, he's really putting himself out there with this order. And also you want to take a look at this, because the phrase person means an individual or entity in the order. Any U.S. organization which merely employs a foreigner engaging, I'm sorry, reading very badly. I'm just too excited, I guess. Any U.S. organization which merely employs a foreigner engaging in the listed offenses is also subject to frozen assets, which I think is really brilliant, because we're not talking about prosecution here necessarily. I mean, that could be another step, and I'm sure it will be. But even if there's a sense that they have been involved, employed somebody, given refuge to people, had the idea, whether it's a person or an entity, they are subject to frozen assets. And I think this is absolutely the perfect thing to do, to go after to hit them where it hurts when it comes to people like the Clintons, who are completely out for every cent they can get. And some of the activities that they have undertaken are just absolutely unbelievable. So if anybody's read Clinton Cash, they'll kind of get it. Do read it, or see what you can find on another YouTube channel, and see if you can find the author Peter. Okay, I should have these things written down. But anyway, Clinton Cash. You can see it on YouTube, and it's quite scary to see what these guys have been up to. But this is definitely going after Bill and Hillary specifically, and in the best possible way, because rather than waiting for the FBI, CIA, or any of the other guys that have been totally corrupted to look into this stuff, and rather than wasting all of the taxpayers' money on doing that, it's like, okay, we have the evidence that you have been doing this, we're going to freeze your assets right away. And isn't that the perfect way to get to people who are just basically in the, fleecing, not only in the American people, the Russian people, everybody in the world. Uranium One ties into this as well, because that was a fleecing activity as well, pay for play. A lot of people wonder how it was possible for Uranium One to go through, since it had to go through a government sanctioned process. Well, keep in mind that Hillary was the Secretary of State at the time, and she was sitting on that very committee. And so there was a huge amount of pay to play. So if anybody doubts the idea that 9 people can be co-opted into saying yes in a situation where they really should have been looking a lot farther, deeper into the situation, don't be fooled. It's actually something that happens all the time. And this is why lobbying, pay to play, extortion, trafficking, all this stuff comes together, because there are so many links and ties to all of this stuff. Now consider that if reports from the Hill are accurate, an FBI mole deep within the Russian uranium industry uncovered evidence that Russian nuclear officials had routed millions of dollars to the U.S., designated to benefit former President Bill Clinton's charitable foundation during the time Secretary of State Hillary Clinton served on a government body that provided a favorable decision to Moscow, the Uranium One approval, which is what I was just talking about, that government body. And there's just no coincidences here. Now, anybody who has tuned into Charles Ortel, if you've listened to my interview with him, or anybody else's, if you've gone over to Jason Goodman's channel, Sunday with Charles, you'll hear about the absolute criminal activities that have gone on under the guise of the Clinton Foundation. And if you think in any way that this is a charitable organization, you'll have another thing coming. And all of this stuff is going to be exposed for what it is. It's just a huge Ponzi scheme, and it's Watergate times 100 as far as the chicanery that's going on here. I've used that word twice. Oh, Peter Schweitzer. I'm sorry. That's the name of the guy who wrote Clinton Cash, and of course it shows up in this article here. Peter Schweitzer, Clinton Cash. Do look for it on YouTube. I will try to put some of these links into the description. It's hard when you're doing this live because I never know what I'm going to be bringing up, but I will try to do it after I've signed off. Okay, so the Russians were compromising American contractors in the nuclear industry with kickbacks and extortion threats, all of which raised legitimate national security concerns. And none of that evidence got aired before the Obama administration made those decisions. A person who worked on the case told The Hill, speaking on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution, I'll bet, by U.S. or Russian officials, and that was published in The Hill. Okay, and then of course there's video here from Fox News. As I was saying earlier, if you go on to Zero Hedge and take a look at this yourself, you can go through the videos and take a look at all of the information, because there's a lot here. I want to bring it to your attention because it's so important that people understand this. Pass it along. Pass along this video. Subscribe for updates. But make sure that you are letting people know, because most of the people that I know that are not aware of what's happening here think that Uranium One it's been dealt with and it's old news and there's nothing to see here, folks, move along. And yet this is very, very new. This is December 21st, and today being December 27th, there are new things happening all the time. Oh, and I did want to mention the Podesta brothers, of course. Meanwhile, Tony's DNC operative brother, John Podesta, reportedly recommended that the Podesta group hired David Adams, Hillary Clinton's chief advisor at the State Department. Okay, let me just go back and say that properly. My apologies. Meanwhile, Tony's DNC operative brother, John Podesta, reportedly recommended that the Podesta group hire David Adams, Hillary Clinton's chief advisor at the State Department, giving them a direct liaison between the group's Russian clients and Hillary Clinton's State Department. I just find this phenomenal. You know, it's so typical Hillary Clinton, so typical Clinton, so typical projection of any kind when you have somebody like this who's trying to cover up their absolute criminal activities. And it has everything to do with the Russians. What do? Accuse their enemy of the exact same thing. I mean, it's as old as the hills, and it's all going to be coming out. And really, don't piss off the guy that is able to sign the executive orders, okay? It's really not a good idea. And Trump's way smarter than most of these guys put together. I'm going to be posting something that I found from the 1990s with Trump, and it was quite phenomenal, actually, because a lot of people talk about how he has no experience in politics, which is true, but how he has no real understanding of the political system, and yet Congress was calling on him to advise them when things were falling out of the market, the bottom was falling out, as they say, of the market in the early 90s, and I'm going to be doing a video on that. So, hypothetically, if the Uranium One deal is deemed corrupt by the Trump administration and, quote, Russian nuclear officials, unquote, indeed routed millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation and Tony Podesta lobbied on behalf of the deal for the Clinton Foundation, it stands to reason that this executive order could freeze the U.S.-housed assets of quite a few individuals. Of note, assets can be frozen with no prior warning, as Trump has declared a national emergency due to the scope and gravity of the threat posed by said individuals. How many people really know that we are in a national emergency? How many realize that he has declared a national emergency? Who has reported on this? Have you seen it anywhere? Maybe you've seen it on Fox. I haven't been looking at Fox lately, but I just want to get this information out to people. Spread it via your social media sites. Talk about this. For anybody that feels like there's not enough evidence of corruption, or that Hillary Clinton has done nothing wrong, that they're all going to go away scot-free, or if they're still on the idea that somehow Trump is trying to deflect from some scandal that is supposedly taking place between he and the Russians, take a look at this order and understand that this is a guy who seems to have the inside scoop on all of this. And it's no surprise, because George Webb has been talking about all of this. He's been putting together all of this information. So when we've been looking at all the different channels that are coming together, we're seeing that it's now critical mass, because we're seeing it from True Pundit, we're seeing it from Zero Hedge, we're seeing it from George Webb, we're seeing it from Trump himself. And this is really amazing. So again, if you have not seen this, please go over, take a look, and read the whole thing. There's lots of information. Of course, there's Clinton, and it just goes on. And I really don't want to bore you with all of this, but hopefully it's not boring. I just don't want to drone on about it. I want you to get the information. Again, the point of this broadcast is to inform you and to get you thinking critically about the situation, not to follow and simply chirp it back to other people, but get yourself the information that you need to be able to answer people when they say things like, well, I saw on CNN, or I saw on my local news channel, or I haven't heard anything about this. This is a perfect opportunity because there's evidence. And as you've heard when I've talked to Dr. Judy on this show, we go on evidence. And this is, when you've got an executive order, that's pretty good evidence. When Trump says this is a national emergency, that's pretty good evidence. So stay tuned, folks, because this is not the last that you've seen of the Uranium One situation. It's not the last you've seen of the trafficking situation. I mean, it goes on and on. There's the organ harvesting, there's child trafficking, there's so much corruption going on, and it's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in 2017 with the whole situation, and in particular this, which has definitely come to the top of the iceberg, and the rest of the iceberg is underneath there for us to be exploring. And do take a look and take a look at the cross references. There's a lot of links in this particular article, and you can go and find out all sorts of different things to do with this particular article. And I think that Zero Hedge is very good at doing that. So sign up at Zero Hedge so you get a chance to be informed about what's happening as it happens. And that's all I'm going to say. I will see you later, and I hope that you're having a great holiday if you're still having holidays, and I hope that I'm just looking forward to 2018 because 2017 has been a pretty crazy year, and we don't want to have too much more craziness. We want to have the craziness come to an end. Okay, over and out. See you later.